Tonight we trade the relentless glow of smartphone screens for the soft moonlight on handmade roof tiles. We exchange the hum of traffic for the whisper of a breeze through a persimmon tree in a quiet courtyard. You find yourself standing before a heavy, wooden gate, its dark timber weathered by 100 seasons of sun and snow. This isn't just a door, it's a barrier between epochs. On this side, the 21st century with all its haste and noise. On the other, a pocket of suspended time, a traditional Korean Hanok village. You push the gate open, its low groan a protest against the modern world, and as you step across the high wooden threshold, a deliberate design to keep out evil spirits and floodwaters, you quickly learn to lift your feet. The air itself changes. It smells of aged pine, damp earth, and the faint, sweet scent of flowering orchids. The chaotic mental checklist of your day, emails, deadlines, notifications, begins to feel like a faint, irrelevant echo from a distant land. But this tranquility comes with a reality check. You'd last about a day here in winter without understanding the ondol heating system, likely succumbing to the cold while surrounded by the very technology designed to save you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The path under your feet is not paved with asphalt, but with irregular stones, worn smooth in the center by generations of passing feet. They glisten in the moonlight, still damp from an evening rain. Your eyes, accustomed to the harsh, flat light of LEDs, must now adjust to the deep, velvety shadows and the pools of soft luminescence cast by traditional Gyeongsol paper lanterns hanging from eaves. The village unfolds before you not in a grid, but organically, a collection of low-slung, elegant structures that seem to have grown from the hillside itself. The dominant sound is the absence of sound you're used to. Instead, there's the chirping of crickets, the rustle of something small in the underbrush, and the distant, comforting hoot of an owl. You feel your shoulders drop, a physical unclenching you didn't even realize was possible. This is the first lesson of the Hanok. It does not dominate the landscape, it converses with it. As you walk deeper into the labyrinth of narrow alleys, the architecture starts to reveal its subtle logic. The houses, or Hanok, are uniformly built with their backs to the hill, facing south or southeast towards the water and the sun, a principle called bisanimsu, back to the mountain, face to the water. This isn't just feng shui, it's a brilliant, practical response to the environment. The mountain at the back provides a windbreak from harsh northern gales in the winter, while the open front captures the low southern sun, bathing the rooms in life-giving light and warmth. You're witnessing a mainstream historical fact of Korean design, a geomantic principle that dictated the layout of everything from peasant homes to royal palaces, ensuring they were in harmony with the natural forces, not fighting against them. But look closer at the base of the walls, where the wooden pillars meet the stone foundation. You might spot a few granules of white powder or a small, withered pouch tucked into a crevice, the strategic placement of red pepper flakes, salt, or even needles to ward off malevolent spirits and mischievous goblins, known as dokibi. It was the Joseon-era equivalent of installing a security system, a spiritual deterrent for those things that go bump in the night. Because, after all, what self-respecting ghost would want to cross a line of potent chili powder? You pause before one particular home, its curved tiled roof a dark silhouette against the starry sky. The main building, the anchi, is secluded and private, while the men's quarters, the sarangchi, often sit closer to the front. Historians still argue whether this strict separation of space was a Confucian ideal that reinforced social hierarchies or a remarkably practical division of labor that gave women unparalleled autonomy within their own domain. The debate continues, but as you stand there, you can almost feel the silent, centuries-old stories held within those wooden frames, of secret glances across courtyards, of scholarly debates in the study, of the quiet, powerful matriarch who ruled the inner chambers. You take a deep breath, the cool night air filling your lungs, and realize you're not just visiting a museum. You are a guest in a living, breathing entity, and its slow, steady pulse is already beginning to sync with your own. Your hand instinctively reaches out, your fingertips brushing against the coarse, weathered surface of a massive wooden pillar. The wood is not painted, not varnished, but left to the elements, its grain raised and textured like the skin of a great, slumbering beast. This is your first real, tactile conversation with the hanok, and it's speaking a silent language of grain and joinery. You learn that this isn't just timber. It's han, a complex Korean concept encompassing a feeling of resigned sorrow, patience, and a quiet endurance that comes from weathering life's hardships. The house embodies it. It has stood through blistering summers and deep, silent snows, its wood expanding and contracting with a series of gentle creaks and sighs that are the building's own native tongue. You're not just looking at a structure, you're reading a biography written in pine and clay. You step back to take in the full sentence of its architecture. The house is a study in elegant lines and natural curves. The most striking feature is the way the roof seems to float, its heavy tiled mass lifted by a series of graceful brackets, called gongpa, that fan out from the top of the pillars like the opened petals of a wooden flower. This isn't merely decorative flair, it's genius structural engineering. These brackets distribute the immense weight of the roof evenly down the columns and into the ground, allowing for wide, open spaces inside without the clutter of load-bearing walls. It's the hanok skeletal system, and its beauty is entirely inseparable from its function. You notice how the pillars themselves are slightly thicker at the bottom, tapering gently as they rise, a subtle touch that makes the entire building feel grounded, stable, as if it's growing up from the earth rather than being planted on it. Now, follow the line of the eaves as they curve upwards at the corners into that distinctive, gentle swoop. It's not a dramatic, pagoda-like spike, but a soft, uplifting curve, like the corners of a subtle smile. This design, known as kioma, does more than just look beautiful. On a practical level, it allows the low winter sun to stream deep into the rooms, warming the floors, while in the summer, when the sun is high, the deep eaves cast a cool, protective shadow over the house, a natural form of climate control. But there's a philosophical layer, too. That upward curve is said to reflect a hopeful spirit, an optimism, a refusal to let the roof, or one's spirits, sag under the weight of the world. It's the architectural equivalent of keeping your chin up. Let your gaze travel downwards, to the foundation. The house doesn't sit on a solid concrete slab. Instead, it's perched on a series of sturdy, carved stone blocks, called jangdokdi, which lift the entire wooden structure off the damp ground. This is a mainstream historical fact of Korean carpentry, a vital defense against rot and moisture. But it does something else, something almost magical. It creates a narrow, shadowed space beneath the floor, a secret world for cats to prowl and for the air to circulate. This crawl space is the lungs of the ondol heating system you'll soon feel. But for now, it gives the hanok a feeling of lightness, as if it could, at any moment, decide to simply float away on the mist. Now, look at the walls. They are not a solid, imposing barrier. They are a complex lattice of wooden frames, some filled with a thick, earthen plaster, and others with multiple layers of a mysterious, translucent paper. This is where the hanok's personality truly emerges. The use of natural, breathable materials means the house is constantly, subtly interacting with its environment. On a humid day, the clay walls absorb excess moisture from the air. On a dry day, they release it back, acting as a natural humidifier. You're essentially standing inside a living, breathing organism. It's a stark contrast to the hermetically sealed environments we inhabit today, where the only way to control the climate is to fight it with a roaring furnace or a whirring air conditioner. The hanok doesn't fight, it adapts. That beautiful, sturdy wood you're admiring? A significant portion of the ancient hanoks still standing today, especially those from the Joseon dynasty, were built using pine logs that were intentionally submerged in mudflats or saltwater for years, sometimes even decades, before being used. This wasn't some bizarre architectural ritual, it was a brilliant preservation technique. The saline environment forced the sap out and prevented insects and fungi from feasting on the timber, resulting in wood of legendary durability. They were essentially pickling their houses before building them. Imagine the patience required, felling a tree for a home you yourself might never live to see completed, trusting that your grandchildren would benefit from your foresight. Historians still argue whether the profound philosophical principles embedded in every beam and joint, the adherence to Confucian order, the Taoist pursuit of harmony with nature, the Buddhist acceptance of impermanence, were the conscious driving force for the average carpenter or simply the happy byproduct of centuries of refined, practical problem-solving. Was the master builder thinking about the cosmic balance of yin and yang as he carved a bracket, or was he just focused on making sure the roof didn't collapse? The truth likely lives in the space between, in the hands of artisans for whom practicality and spirituality were one and the same. As you stand there, your hand still resting on the pillar, you feel that unity. The house isn't just built. It's composed. You tilt your head back, your gaze climbing the weathered pillars until it lands on the crowning glory of the entire structure, the roof. It's not merely a functional lid to keep out the rain, it's the hanok's most expressive feature, a sweeping, curved canopy of deep gray that seems to embrace the sky itself. From a distance, it looked like a uniform surface, but up close, you see it's a meticulous tapestry of thousands upon thousands of individual clay tiles, laid in overlapping rows like the scales of a great, slumbering fish. The ones that form the convex rows are the jiban, rounded and robust, channeling the water away, while the concave ones that cradle them are the yunbin, creating the deep, signature grooves. This is the essence of jiwa, the art of the Korean tiled roof, a testament to patience and fire. Running along the spine of the roof, you see a line of decorative tiles, often adorned with intricate lotus or peony patterns. But it's at the very ends of the main ridge, where the two massive slopes meet, that your eyes are drawn to the guardians. These are the japsang, a row of small, mythical clay figures standing in solemn procession. You might spot a rabbit, a monkey, or a fearsome-looking immortal, each one a fired clay soldier in a celestial army. Their number wasn't arbitrary, it was a carefully coded message. Commoners were allowed maybe 3 or 5, a nobleman could have 7, but only a royal palace could boast a full procession of 9 or 11. They were a very public, very permanent declaration of status, a social hierarchy baked in clay and set out to dry in the sun. But their primary job, everyone agreed, was to ward off evil. It was believed that malicious spirits traveled in straight lines, and this bizarre celestial menagerie created a spiritual obstacle course, confusing and deterring them from entering the home. It's the Joseon equivalent of putting a "Beware of the Dog" sign on your roof, only the dogs are mythical demons. Now, look at the very tip of the eaves, where the last tile ends. You'll often find a small, downward curving tile, sometimes carved with a bat, a symbol of good fortune, or a simple, elegant design. This is the matbawi, the end tile. Its job is both practical and poetic, to gracefully conclude the flow of the roof, to give the rain a clean, definitive place to drip, and to provide a final, aesthetic full stop to the long, lyrical sentence of the eaves. It's a detail that could have been easily omitted, a mere functional afterthought. But in the hanok, even the drip line is considered worthy of beauty. This attention to the minutiae, the belief that every single component, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, contributes to the whole, is what separates a mere building from a work of art. The material itself, that distinctive gray clay, has a story to tell. The process of making these tiles was a community effort, a ritual of mud and fire. The clay was sourced locally, trodden by foot to the perfect consistency, pressed into wooden molds, and then fired for days in massive kilns. The resulting tiles were incredibly durable, capable of lasting centuries, yet they possessed a breathable quality, allowing the humid air of Korean summers to pass through them, preventing the wooden structure beneath from stewing in its own moisture. This is a mainstream historical fact of Korean architecture. The entire roof system was a breathing, living entity. The tiles protected the house from the elements, while the air space beneath them, and the porous clay itself, allowed the building to ventilate naturally. It was a perfect, self-regulating system. A little secret hidden in plain sight on some of the older, more ornate roofs, especially those of palaces or temples. Amidst the procession of japsang, you might find a lone figure that looks distinctly out of place, a figure in Mongolian attire. This wasn't a case of architectural appropriation, it was a massive, nationwide act of spiritual revenge. After the long, bitter period of Mongol domination in the 13th and 14th centuries, Koreans began incorporating these figures onto their roofs, believing that forcing their former oppressors to eternally stand guard in the rain and snow, bearing the weight of the roof for all eternity, was a fitting and powerful form of posthumous payback. It's a stunning example of how architecture can become a canvas for national catharsis. Historians still argue whether the primary inspiration for the iconic curved roof came from the practical need for structural stability and efficient water runoff, from a deliberate aesthetic choice to mimic the gentle curves of the surrounding mountains, or from a deeper, symbolic desire to replicate the shape of a scholar's ink brush, forever arching against the parchment of the sky. The debate is as loud as the tiles themselves. But as you stand there, tracing the swooping line of the eaves against the clouds, you feel the result, not the reason. The roof doesn't just cover the space, it defines it, creating a sheltered world beneath its wings that feels both protective and profoundly connected to the heavens. It is the Hanok's grandest gesture, a final, elegant argument for a life lived in harmony with the world, not in defiance of it. You reach out and press your palm flat against one of the wall panels that isn't made of earth and plaster. It gives, just slightly, a gentle springiness that is utterly alien after a lifetime of encountering drywall and concrete. This is the Chunghoji, the lattice door, and its surface is not glass or wood, but multiple layers of a remarkable material, hanji, paper made from the inner bark of the mulberry tree. You slide the door open, not on a metal hinge, but on a wooden peg that pivots smoothly in a socket, and the entire wall, light as a sigh, glides silently along a narrow track. In this single, simple motion, the entire boundary between your private room and the wider world dissolves. The solid wall becomes an opening, and you realize the Hanok's greatest magic trick. Its walls are often not walls at all, but permeable membranes. Let's talk about this paper, because it's a substance that deserves its own epic poem. Hanji is not the flimsy, tear-prone paper of your office printer. It's a triumph of traditional craftsmanship, woven from long, resilient mulberry fibers that are beaten, mixed with a viscous sap, and meticulously laid on a bamboo screen. The result is a material of deceptive strength, a remarkable durability that can, astonishingly, last for centuries. It's translucent, not transparent, filtering the harsh sunlight into a soft, diffuse glow that illuminates the room without casting harsh shadows. It's like living inside a lantern. And it breathes. The microscopic gaps between the fibers allow air to pass through, making the Hanok a naturally ventilated space. On a summer evening, you can slide all these paper-paneled doors open and the house becomes little more than a pavilion, a collection of pillars holding up a roof, with the breeze as its only true walls. Now, look closer at the wooden frame holding the hanji. There are no nails here, no screws, no metal brackets. The entire lattice is a complex three-dimensional puzzle of interlocking joints, each piece carved to fit its neighbor with a precision that leaves no room for error. This is the art of bunchae, traditional Korean joinery. The craftsmen who built these homes worked with an understanding of wood's nature, how it expands, contracts, and moves with the seasons. Instead of fighting this movement with rigid metal fasteners, which would eventually split the wood, they designed joints that accommodate it, that tighten and loosen in a slow, seasonal dance. The building isn't static. It's a living, breathing entity that shifts and settles, its wooden bones creaking and groaning in a language of their own. It's a stark contrast to our modern constructions, which seek to defy nature with immovable, silent permanence. The genius of this system is its flexibility, both literal and figurative. Because the walls are not load-bearing, the interior layout of a hanok is incredibly adaptable. A large central hall, the maru, can be partitioned off into smaller rooms for sleeping by simply sliding these paper doors into place. In the morning, you slide them back, and the space is unified again. The house could change its function with the time of day or the needs of the family. It was a fluid, dynamic living environment, not a collection of rigid, predefined boxes. This is a mainstream historical fact of Korean domestic life. The home was not a fixed stage, but a responsive, evolving partner in the daily drama of family. The hanji paper and its uses went far beyond just windows and doors. Because it was so strong, breathable, and mildly antiseptic, it was used for an astonishing array of purposes. People made clothing out of it, armor out of it, and even used it as a primitive form of wallpaper to insulate their homes. But perhaps its most bizarre and brilliant application was in emergency medicine. If a person suffered a deep cut, a layer of hanji paper could be applied directly to the wound. The porous nature of the paper would allow the wound to breathe while stanching the bleeding, and its clean, sterile manufacturing process, compared to other cloths of the era, made it surprisingly effective at preventing infection. It was the Joseon-era equivalent of a battlefield bandage, a literal paper patch for your problems. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of paper as a primary building material was driven more by its incredible practical properties, its affordability, its availability, its insulating and ventilating qualities, or by a deeper, philosophical preference for impermanence and lightness, a conscious rejection of the heavy, stone fortresses of other cultures in favor of a structure that was more tent than tomb. Was it a choice born of brilliant resourcefulness or profound wisdom? As you run your fingers over the smooth, resilient surface, feeling the faint texture of the mulberry fibers, the distinction seems to blur into irrelevance. The paper wall is both a shield and a veil, providing privacy without isolation, defining a space without confining it. It is the hanok's most delicate and, paradoxically, one of its most resilient features. You step out of the room, your feet leaving the warm embrace of the heated floor and meeting the cool, smooth surface of a wide, polished wooden platform. This is the maru, the veranda that wraps around the core of the house, and it is the true, beating heart of the hanok. It's not quite inside, not quite outside, but a liminal space that masterfully erases the boundary between the two. You sit on its edge, letting your legs dangle over the side, and the entire world feels within reach. The maru is the home's communal living room, its dining area, its children's playground, and its stage for quiet contemplation, all rolled into one seamless, wooden plane. From this vantage point, you have a perfect, framed view of the courtyard, the madang. It's not a lawn in the Western sense, but a swept earth stage for daily life, enclosed by the L-shaped wings of the house. You can see everything from here. On a hot summer afternoon, this is where you'd sprawl out to catch the breeze. The cool would a welcome relief against your skin. In the evening, it's where the family would gather for meals, sitting on cushions with low tables, the sounds of conversation and clinking dishes mingling with the crickets. And on a moonlit night like this, it's a private observatory, a place to lie back and watch the constellations slowly wheel overhead, unobstructed by the roof's deep eaves. The maru is the hanok's principle of connection made manifest. The wood itself, usually a rich, golden Korean pine, is worn to a silken softness by generations of bare feet, sliding doors, and the endless comings and goings of daily life. Its surface is not perfectly flat. It bears the gentle undulations and subtle scars of its long service. This is where the children would have played their games, where the women would have done their sewing, and where the men would have discussed poetry and politics after a long day. The maru witnessed it all, the whispered secrets, the joyous celebrations, the quiet grief. It absorbed the energy of the household, becoming a repository of family history. You can almost feel the echoes of that accumulated life humming just beneath its polished surface. This open design was a brilliant social and environmental adaptation. During the humid, sticky summers, the maru acts as a giant cooling fin. Air circulates freely beneath the raised floor and across its wide surface, pulling heat away from the interior rooms. By sliding all the paper-paneled doors open, you essentially turn the entire house into one large, shaded pavilion, capturing any available breeze. It's a form of natural air conditioning that requires no electricity, only an understanding of airflow and a willingness to live in harmony with the weather rather than sealed away from it. This is a mainstream historical fact of Korean living. The maru was the centerpiece of a passive cooling system that made the intense heat of a Korean summer not just bearable, but often quite pleasant. But the maru had its quirks, its own set of unspoken rules. For instance, its polished surface could be treacherously slick after a rain, or when dew settled in the early morning. Learning to walk on the maru required a certain light-footed grace, especially for women in traditional hanbok with their long, flowing skirts. There's a fringe tidbit of etiquette that speaks volumes. It was considered deeply improper, almost vulgar, to wear outdoor shoes on the maru. This wooden platform was a sacred, clean space, a buffer zone between the dirt of the outside world and the purity of the inner rooms. To tramp across it with muddy shoes was a social transgression, a violation of the home's spiritual hygiene. It was a place for bare feet or clean, soft-soled socks, a tactile reminder that you were entering a different kind of space. Historians still argue whether the prominence of the maru, this blurring of interior and exterior, was a direct architectural reflection of a more communal, less privacy-obsessed Confucian society, or if it was simply the most logical and comfortable way to live in a monsoon-prone climate with distinct seasons. Was the culture shaped by the architecture, or was the architecture a perfect physical manifestation of the culture? The debate is as fluid as the space itself. As you sit here now, feeling the night air on your skin and the solid, reliable wood beneath you, the answer feels less important than the experience. The maru doesn't ask you to choose between inside and out. It invites you to exist in both, simultaneously, teaching you that the most important moments often happen in the spaces in between. You slide back from the maru's cool edge, retreating into the room, and as you do, a subtle, profound change occurs. The night air, which was just a moment ago a refreshing presence on your skin, is replaced by a gentle, radiating warmth that seeps up through the floor, through the thin mat you're sitting on, and into the very core of your body. This isn't the dry, blowing heat of a furnace or the radiant glare of an electric heater. This is different. This is ondol, the warm stone system, and it is the ancient, ingenious soul of Korean comfort, a technology so effective it shaped how an entire nation lived, slept, and dined for centuries. To understand ondol, you have to forget everything you know about central heating. This isn't about heating the air. This is about heating the mass of the building itself. Follow the logic downwards. Beneath this beautifully polished wooden floor and its layers of oiled paper and clay, lies a labyrinth. A network of stone flues, carefully laid out like the passages of an underground ant farm, snakes its way from the kitchen's cooking fire, carrying hot air and smoke on a slow, meandering journey beneath the entire house before finally escaping through a chimney on the far opposite side. The stone floor above these flues, often thick slabs of shale, absorbs the heat, turning the entire floor into a giant, low-temperature radiator. The heat is steady, even, and deeply penetrating. It's the kind of warmth that loosens tight muscles and coaxes drowsiness from your bones, a primal comfort that feels like being cradled by the earth itself. This system dictated the very rhythm of life in a hanok. The firing of the ondol was a daily ritual, usually happening in the early morning and again in the evening, timed with meal preparations. The cook, almost always the matriarch, wasn't just making breakfast, she was quite literally warming the entire home, her culinary duties intertwined with her role as the keeper of the family's comfort. The heat would take time to build and would then linger for hours, a testament to the thermal mass of the stones and clay. Waking up on a frigid winter morning didn't involve a desperate dash across a cold floor to turn a dial. It meant waking to a gentle, pervasive warmth that had been building since before dawn. This is a mainstream historical fact. The ondol system is one of the oldest and most enduring forms of underfloor heating in the world, a Korean innovation that dates back thousands of years and became the definitive feature of domestic architecture. The genius of ondol created one of Korea's most enduring cultural habits, sitting and sleeping on the floor. With the most comfortable spot in the house being the warm floor, it made no sense to elevate yourself on a cold, drafty bed or chair. Life happened at ground level. People ate at low tables, sat on cushions, and unrolled their bedding directly onto the warm floor at night. This fostered a sense of intimacy and immediacy with the home itself. Your entire living space was your furniture. It also led to the development of specific customs, like the strict prohibition of wearing shoes indoors, a rule that persists powerfully in Korea today. You didn't just track dirt onto the carpet, you tracked it onto your bed, your dinner table, your primary source of warmth. The labyrinth of flues, the gudal, needed to be cleaned regularly to prevent the buildup of soot, which was a major fire hazard. But who would volunteer to crawl through a dark, narrow, soot-filled tunnel? The answer, often, was to send in a chicken. A live chicken, thrust into the entrance of the flue, would flap and scramble its way through the dark passage in a frantic bid for freedom, its wings agitating and displacing the loose soot as it went. By the time it emerged, terrified and filthy, on the other side, a significant amount of cleaning had been accomplished. It was a bizarre, resourceful, and undoubtedly terrifying bit of poultry-based home maintenance that gives a whole new meaning to the term spring cleaning. Historians still argue whether the development of the sophisticated ondol system was the primary catalyst for Korea's unique floor-sitting culture, or if a pre-existing cultural preference for low-level living simply inspired the refinement of this heating method. Did the technology create the custom, or did the custom demand the technology? It's a classic chicken and egg dilemma, though in this case, the chicken had a very specific, soot-related job. As you lie back, feeling the deep, radiant warmth press against your spine, the debate feels academic. The result is all that matters. The ondol is more than a heating system, it is a silent, generous presence, a testament to a philosophy where comfort is not a blast of hot air, but a patient, pervasive embrace from the ground up. The source of that life-giving warmth beckons you now, drawing you away from the cozy main rooms and towards the utilitarian heart of the home, the kitchen, or buok. You don't so much walk into it as you step down into it, a deliberate design that kept the smoke and smells of cooking from seeping into the living quarters. The air here is different, thicker, carrying the faint, sweet scent of smoldering oak and the earthy tang of fermented pastes. This is the domain of the matriarch, the jubu, a space of relentless, rhythmic labor where the alchemy of sustenance was performed daily. It feels less like a room and more like a workshop, an engine room dedicated to powering the human bodies within the hanok. Your eyes are immediately drawn to the colossal earthenware jars, the jangdok, lined up in rows on a raised platform just outside the kitchen door. They stand like silent, pot-bellied sentinels, each one containing a different stage of fermentation. Dark, salty soy sauce, ganjang, thick, pungent soybean paste, doenjang, and the fiery red chili paste, gochujang, the holy trinity of Korean flavor. These weren't just ingredients, they were the family's culinary heritage, living cultures passed down from mother to daughter, some starters so old they were considered part of the family. The jangdok themselves, glazed in a rich brown, are masterpieces of practical design, their wide mouths allowing for easy access, their narrow necks minimizing exposure to air, and their porous bodies breathing with the seasons, allowing the fermenting contents to mature in harmony with the ambient temperature and humidity. But the true throne of this domain is the agunji, the low, open fire stove built directly into the floor. It's a deceptively simple structure, a recessed firebox where logs are fed, topped by a large, stationary cast iron cauldron, the gamasot. This single setup was the powerhouse of the entire home. Here, the massive quantities of rice for the family were steamed. Here, the endless pots of soup and stew were simmered. And most importantly, here, the fire was lit that sent its heat snaking through the ondol flues, warming the very bones of the house. The agunji was a dual-purpose engine, its energy harnessed for both cuisine and comfort. Tending to it was a constant, demanding task, chopping wood, managing the flame, ensuring the heat was just right for both the cooking and the heating. It was a role that required strength, patience, and an intuitive understanding of fire. This setup is a mainstream historical fact of Korean domestic life, a system that placed the woman in absolute control of the home's core utilities. She was the engineer of its climate and the architect of its nutrition. Her day began before sunrise, lighting the agunji to warm the house and prepare the morning meal, and ended long after dusk, cleaning the ashes and preparing for the next day. The kitchen was her command center, and from it, she wielded a quiet, profound power over the health and harmony of everyone within the walls. The separation of the anchi and sarangchi might have given the men a space for scholarly pursuits, but it was the woman in the buok who kept the entire physical organism of the family alive and functioning. In the soot and shadows of that agunji, you see that large cauldron? It wasn't just for cooking rice. In a pinch, and with a very thorough cleaning afterwards, it could serve another vital, albeit grim, purpose, as a bathing tub for the youngest members of the family. Before the widespread adoption of separate bathhouses, a mother would heat water in the gamasot, then carefully lift her small children into the wide, warm metal basin for a scrub. It was a pragmatic, multifunctional use of a major household asset. Imagine the scene. By day, a vessel for simmering stews. By night, a makeshift spa for a grimy toddler. It's a stark reminder that in a traditional home, every single object had to justify its existence, often in multiple, creatively practical ways. Historians still argue whether the design of the separate, sunken kitchen was purely a practical solution to the problems of smoke and smell, or if it also reinforced a social hierarchy that physically and symbolically separated the lowly work of cooking and maintenance from the elevated pursuits of scholarship and leisure that happened in the main rooms. Was it a brilliant piece of environmental design, or an architectural manifestation of Confucian class and gender roles? The heat from the agunji, after all, warmed the scholar's study just as thoroughly as the inner quarters, a silent, undeniable testament to their interdependence. As you stand in this humble, powerful space, feeling the residual warmth from the hearth and smelling the ghosts of 1,000 meals, you understand that the true heart of the Hanok wasn't the elegant moru or the quiet study. It was here, in the soot-streaked, oath-scented kitchen, where fire was tamed to nurture both body and home. Leaving the earthy, visceral warmth of the kitchen, you are drawn towards a wing of the house that feels distinctly separate, both in atmosphere and architecture. This is the sarangchi, the men's quarters and the scholar's study, and as you cross its threshold, the air seems to change. It's cooler, quieter, smelling faintly of old paper, ink, and polished wood. Located farthest from the bustle of the kitchen and inner quarters, often with its own small courtyard or garden view, the sarangchi was a sanctuary for contemplation, a deliberate retreat from the messy, emotional world of the family. This was where the male head of the household, the seonbi or scholar, would retreat to read, write poetry, discuss state affairs with his peers, and cultivate his mind. The room is sparsely furnished, a study in minimalist elegance. The dominant feature is a low, wide desk, its surface worn smooth by the resting of arms and the shuffling of papers. On it sits the essential tools of the scholar's trade, a heavy ink stone, yunjiok, a solid ink stick, and a collection of brushes of various sizes, their bamboo handles dark and shiny from use. The walls might be lined with tall, elegant bookshelves, chaejabang, filled with leather-bound volumes of Confucian classics, historical records, and poetry anthologies. Unlike the multifunctional spaces of the main house, this room had a single, sacred purpose: the pursuit of knowledge and moral cultivation. It was a physical manifestation of the Confucian ideal that a man's highest calling was to refine his character through study. This separation was more than just a desire for peace and quiet. In the strict Confucian social order of the Joseon dynasty, the segregation of spaces reinforced the segregation of roles. The inner quarters, the anchi, were the domain of the women and the private life of the family. The sarangchi was the public, male-facing sphere. Here, the master of the house would receive male guests, conduct business, and engage in the sophisticated verbal jousting and poetry competitions that were the hallmark of the educated elite. The very design of the building, a separate structure connected by a courtyard, created a necessary buffer, ensuring that the women of the household remained in neo, the inner world, unseen by male outsiders. It was an architecture of social rules. But this wasn't just a space for stuffy academics. It was also a place for the appreciation of simple, profound beauty. A single, unadorned celadon vase might sit in a niche, holding a single, carefully chosen branch from a pine tree. The view from the window would be meticulously framed to capture a particular rock in the garden or a sliver of a distant mountain, a living painting that changed with the light and seasons. This aesthetic, known as soyang**, valued emptiness, asymmetry, and natural imperfection. A cracked glaze on the teacup, a knotted piece of wood used as a bookend, these weren't flaws. They were features, reminders of the beauty of transience and the hand of nature. This is a mainstream historical fact of Korean elite culture. The sarangchi was the epicenter of a refined aesthetic philosophy that influenced art, literature, and manners for centuries. For all his high-minded pursuit of virtue and knowledge, he was still a man subject to the annoyances of the physical world. And one of the greatest threats to his concentration, and to his precious paper and books, was the common bookworm. The scholarly solution? Not pesticides, but poetry. It was a common practice to write a small, sharp poem on a slip of paper and insert it into the bookshelf. The poem wasn't for the scholar's enjoyment. It was a written curse, a verbal trap intended to offend the sensibilities of the bookworm so deeply that it would abandon its feast and leave the library. It was a battle of wits against insects, fought with the might of the written word. One can only imagine the frustration of a scholar, finding his prized volumes still riddled with holes, muttering about the poor literary taste of the local insect population. Historians still argue whether the sarangchi was truly a space of intellectual freedom and personal cultivation, or if it was, in fact, a gilded cage that enforced a rigid, often isolating, social role upon the male elite, separating them from the emotional richness and daily realities of family life. Was it a sanctuary or a prison of privilege? The quiet of the room, so conducive to deep thought, could also be the quiet of profound loneliness. As you sit at the worn desk, tracing the grain of the wood with your finger, you feel the duality of the space, the weight of expectation and the liberating possibility of a mind allowed to wander, unencumbered, through the realms of thought and ink. You retreat from the formal, intellectual air of the sarangchi, moving deeper into the heart of the home, crossing a courtyard that feels more private, more intimate. You enter the anchi, the inner quarters, and the energy shifts palpably. This is the domain of the women, the true nucleus of family life, and its design is a masterclass in seclusion, practicality, and quiet power. The windows here are smaller, the sightlines more carefully controlled, ensuring privacy from the outside world and from the male guests in the sarangchi. But this seclusion wasn't about imprisonment. It was about creating a sovereign territory, a world within a world, ruled by the matriarch. The rooms in the anchi are multifunctional and adaptive, reflecting the fluid nature of women's work. A room might serve as a sleeping space at night, a sewing room by day, and a play area for children in the afternoon. The most important room belongs to the eldest woman, the jubu, and it is often positioned to have the best view of the courtyard and the comings and goings of the entire household. From this command post, she could oversee the kitchen, monitor the children, and manage the complex social dynamics of the extended family, which often included daughters-in-law and their children, all living under one roof. Her authority here was absolute. While the men debated philosophy in their study, the women in the anchi managed the finances, the food stores, the clothing, and the education of the young children, the entire domestic economy. The anchi feels more lived in, more textured than the sparse sarangchi. Here, you'll find the bandaji, a beautifully decorated wooden chest where a woman's most precious personal belongings were stored, her wedding clothes, her jewelry, letters. The ojinjio, or sewing basket, might sit in a corner, a testament to the endless mending and clothes making that fell to the women. The walls are adorned not with scholarly calligraphy, but perhaps with a delicate folding screen painted with flowers or birds. The aesthetic is softer, more personal, speaking to the cycles of life, birth, and nurturing that defined existence here. This was where the family's most private moments unfolded, the whispered conversations between sisters, the lullabies sung to infants, the quiet grief of a personal loss. This separation of spaces is a mainstream historical fact of Joseon dynasty society, a direct architectural expression of the Confucian principle of Neo, which strictly divided the inner, female, and outer, male, spheres. A well-bred woman from a young ban, or aristocratic, family was expected to remain in Ne, the inner world, her life largely invisible to men outside her immediate family. This seclusion was a marker of status and virtue. The design of the hanok, with its winding paths, multiple gates, and carefully positioned buildings, made this social ideal a physical reality. A male guest could visit the sarangchi for years and never once catch a glimpse of the women of the household. But within these walls, a vibrant, self-sufficient culture thrived. One of the secret languages of the anchi was hanbok pockets. The traditional women's hanbok featured a wide, ribbon-like sash, the gorium, which was often tied in an elaborate knot. Hidden within the folds of this knot and the voluminous sleeves of the jacket, women would cleverly conceal small, personal items, a love note, a small mirror, a bit of money, or even a knife for self-defense. This was a practical, sartorial secret held close to the body, a private storage system in a world where personal privacy was a rare commodity. It was a silent rebellion, a way of carrying a piece of one's own world, quite literally, on one's person. Historians still argue whether the architecture of the anchi ultimately served to oppress women by physically confining them, or if it inadvertently created a powerful matriarchal subculture where women could exercise significant autonomy, free from the direct scrutiny and intervention of men. Was it a cage or a kingdom? The debate is as loud as the folds of a hanbok skirt. As you sit in the quiet of the inner room, looking out at the sliver of courtyard visible through the lattice door, you feel the complexity. This was a world of limitations, but also one of profound influence, where the rhythms of life and death were orchestrated by the quiet, capable hands of the women who ruled this secluded realm. The hanok is not a static monument. It is a living, breathing partner in a slow, graceful dance with the turning of the earth. You felt its bones and explored its rooms, but now you begin to witness its true nature as it responds to the rhythm of the seasons. The house you experienced in the deep quiet of night is not the same house that greets the spring sun or weathers a summer downpour. Its very existence is a dialogue with the elements, and to live within it is to learn its seasonal language, to become a part of its ancient, cyclical song. Come spring, the house begins to exhale. Every paper-paneled door, every wooden shutter is thrown wide open in a ritual of renewal called Yeolchan. This isn't just about airing out the stale air of winter, it's a physical and spiritual cleansing. The warm, gentle breezes are invited to sweep through the maru and the rooms, carrying with them the scent of blooming apricot and pear trees from the courtyard. The heavy, padded ibal quilts used for winter are carefully folded and stored away in massive wooden cabinets called non, and the thick, winter-specific hanji paper that may have been pasted over latticework for extra insulation is carefully removed, allowing the soft, new light of spring to flood the interior. The house sheds its winter skin, becoming light, airy, and open to the world. Then summer arrives with its thick, humid breath. This is when the hanok's passive genius truly shines. The deep eaves you admired earlier now cast long, cool shadows across the maru and the main rooms, creating a shaded refuge from the oppressive midday sun. The courtyard becomes a sunken oven, but the raised floor of the maru, with air circulating freely beneath it, remains remarkably cool. Life slows to a crawl during the hottest part of the day. This is the time for resting on the cool wooden planks of the maru, for sipping chilled siki rice drink, and for listening to the hypnotic drone of cicadas. The house teaches you the art of stillness, of conserving energy, of waiting for the evening cool to arrive. When the summer rains come, they drum a frantic, powerful rhythm on the jiwa tiles, a sound that is both exhilarating and deeply soothing, as you watch the water sheet off the curved eaves in a shimmering curtain. This intimate, necessary relationship with the weather is a mainstream historical fact of pre-modern life. The Korean calendar was filled with seasonal rituals directly tied to the maintenance and adaptation of the home. There was a specific time for repapering the walls, for checking the integrity of the roof tiles after the typhoon season, and for the major task of repairing and replastering the outer clay walls before the harsh winter set in. The house demanded attention, and this demand created a deep, tangible connection to the passing of time that was measured not by digital clocks, but by the sun's angle, the temperature of the floor, and the smell of the air. One of the most peculiar, yet vital, summer rituals involved the household's chamber pots. In the dead of night, a designated family member, often a servant or a lower-ranking daughter-in-law, would be tasked with the discreet disposal of the waste. But this wasn't simply a matter of sanitation, it was an informal, nocturnal economy. This night soil was a valuable commodity, collected by farmers who would pay a small fee for it to use as a powerful fertilizer for their fields. The cover of darkness was essential for this transaction, preserving the family's dignity while contributing to the agricultural cycle that, in turn, fed them. It was a stark, unglamorous, but perfectly logical loop of sustainability that connected the most private function of the hanok to the fertility of the land surrounding it. Historians still argue whether the intense, season-driven adaptation required by hanok life fostered a deeper, more philosophical acceptance of nature's cycles and the impermanence of all things, or if it was simply a relentless, exhausting series of chores that left little room for romantic reflection. Was it a mindful practice or mere survival? As you feel the first cool breeze of a coming autumn rustle the persimmon leaves in the courtyard, you sense the answer is both. The hanok does not shield you from the seasons, it immerses you in them. It teaches you that comfort is not a constant, but a fleeting, precious state to be cultivated in harmony with the world, not in defiance of it. The house breathes in, and it breathes out, and you, within its walls, learn to breathe with it. The hanok is not an island. Your journey now takes you beyond its wooden gate and into the network of narrow, winding alleys that stitch the individual homes into a cohesive community, a village with its own shared heart and common rhythms. Stepping out from your private courtyard, you enter the public artery of the village, a packed earth path just wide enough for two people to pass comfortably. These are not roads designed for carts or cars, but for feet and conversation. They follow the natural contours of the land, curving around ancient trees and outcroppings of rock, creating a sense of organic, unplanned harmony. This is where the private world of the family met the public world of the neighborhood, and the boundaries, while respected, were permeable. Your feet naturally carry you towards the village's communal well, the umol. This isn't just a source of water, it's the social and informational hub, the village's original networking site. Here, early in the morning and again in the cool of the evening, the women would gather, their earthenware jars clinking as they were lowered into the cool, dark depths. This was where news was exchanged, gossip was dissected, and alliances were forged. The rhythm of drawing water, the shared labor, created a bond and a communication network that was exclusively theirs. The quality of the water, its taste and temperature, was a matter of common pride and concern, a shared resource that literally sustained the life of the entire community. You can almost hear the echoes of their laughter and whispered conversations, the sound rising and falling with the turning of the pulley. Nearby, you might find the communal millstone, another shared asset. Grinding grain into flour by hand was a laborious task, and sharing the heavy stone will lighten the burden for every family. Its use would have been scheduled, a quiet understanding of turn-taking that required cooperation and trust. In a larger village, there might be a communal kiln for firing pottery or a shared area for drying crops like red peppers or grains on wide, flat mats called ser. These shared spaces and tools were the physical manifestation of a cooperative spirit, a recognition that while each family had its own private hanok, their survival and prosperity were deeply intertwined. This village structure is a mainstream historical fact of traditional Korean life, a model of community-based living known as dong. The dong was more than a geographic location, it was a social unit. Villagers participated in shared labor, called pumacy, helping each other with large tasks like roof repairs, plastering walls, or harvesting crops. They also celebrated together, gathering for village festivals, shared meals, and rituals to honor local mountain and village spirits. This created a powerful social safety net and a profound sense of belonging. Your neighbors weren't just people who lived nearby. They were your partners in survival, your extended family. The narrow alleys and shared walls meant that privacy, especially for romantic trysts or family arguments, was a fragile concept. Sound traveled easily, and the village was a captive audience to its neighbors' dramas. To mitigate this, a clever, non-verbal warning system sometimes evolved. A person wishing to have a private conversation in the courtyard might casually place a specific object, a particular broom, a certain basket, in a visible spot near the gate. This was a silent signal to any approaching neighbor that now was not a good time for a casual visit, a discreet do not disturb sign from an era before doorbells. It was a small gesture of respect for privacy in a world where walls, both literal and social, were often very thin. Historians still argue whether this traditional village structure, with its emphasis on collective responsibility and social conformity, ultimately fostered a stifling environment that suppressed individual ambition and difference, or if it created an unparalleled sense of security, identity, and mutual care that modern, atomized societies have lost. Was the weight of communal expectation a burden or a blessing? As you walk these quiet paths, you feel the ghost of that collective spirit, a sense that no one here was truly alone. The village was a larger organism, and each Hanok, with its private joys and sorrows, was a single cell within its warm, watchful, and sometimes inconveniently observant, body. The village is not a museum diorama. It is a living entity, and its continued existence relies on a lineage of hands that know the old ways. Your path now leads you away from the quiet alleys to the edge of the village, where the sounds of industry, or rather, the quiet, focused sounds of pre-industrial craft, fill the air. Here, you find the workshops of the artisans, the men and women whose skills are the lifeblood of the Hanok, keeping its wooden bones strong and its clay skin intact. You watch, first, a master thatcher at work, but not on a roof of jiwa tiles. He is working on a more humble, yet equally vital structure, a storage shed or a pavilion, and his material is kakshi, bundles of long, dry reeds. His movements are a slow, rhythmic dance. He takes a thick bundle of reeds, aligns its butt ends perfectly, and then, using a wooden mallet and a wide, flat blade, he begins to beat and dress the bundle, compressing it into a dense, uniform mat. With the help of an apprentice, he lifts this heavy mat onto the roof frame, securing it with bamboo strips. Layer by layer, he builds the roof, each new course overlapping the one below, creating a waterproof shell that is thick, insulating, and beautiful in its rustic texture. His hands, gnarled and tough, know the exact angle and the required compression by feel alone. This knowledge wasn't learned from a book, it was passed down through decades of apprenticeship, through the patient correction of a master's eye. He is not just building a roof, he is weaving a shield against the elements, a craft that has remained essentially unchanged for 1,000 years. Nearby, the sharp, percussive clink of a hammer and chisel on stone draws your attention. A stone mason is carving a new jangdokdi, the foundation stone for a pillar. He isn't using power tools. He works with a series of hand chisels, each with a different shaped head, tapping with a precise, controlled force to slowly chip away the granite, following a pencil line that is more a suggestion than a strict rule. He feels the stone's grain, its hidden faults, and he works with them, not against them. The goal is not a perfectly smooth, machine-made cube, but a solid, stable base that bears the unique marks of its maker, the subtle grooves and undulations that speak of human effort. This respect for the material, this willingness to let it express its own nature, is at the core of all traditional Korean craft. This transmission of skill from one generation to the next is a mainstream historical fact of Korea's pre-modern economy. Society was organized around these hereditary lines of craftsmen: the carpenters, mokso, the masons, the roof tile makers, and the plasterers. Their guilds protected trade secrets and ensured quality, creating a continuity of technique that allowed architectural styles to remain consistent for centuries. The survival of a Hanok village today is directly tied to the survival of these artisans. When a master carpenter dies without passing on his specific knowledge of joinery, it isn't just a person who is lost, it's a library of architectural solutions that vanishes with him. The Jusajil, the final, smooth coat of the walls, was a mix of clay, sand, and a secret, binding ingredient that gave it a hard, durable finish. In many regions, the preferred additive was not a chemical, but a food product, a thin porridge made from cooked seaweed or, even more bizarrely, a batter of wheat flour. The starch in the flour acted as a natural binder, helping the plaster to cure to a hard, smooth surface. It was a classic example of using what was available, of seeing the potential of a common kitchen ingredient in an entirely different context. Imagine, the walls that sheltered generations of a family were, in a very real sense, held together by the same substance used to make their noodles. Historians still argue whether the strict, guild-based system of hereditary craftsmanship ultimately stifled innovation by enforcing rigid traditional methods, or if it was the very mechanism that preserved a pinnacle of technical and aesthetic achievement, ensuring that hard-won knowledge was not lost to carelessness or the pursuit of novelty. Was it a conservative force that held back progress, or a conservative force that saved something precious from being forgotten? As you watch the thatcher's mallet fall with its soft, rhythmic thud and the mason's chisel release a small puff of stone dust, you see the argument embodied in their work. There is no need for innovation when you have already achieved perfection through refinement. Their craft is not about creating something new, but about preserving something timeless, one carefully placed reed, one deliberate chip of stone, at a time. As the last echoes of the craftsman's tools fade with the setting sun, the village undergoes its final, most profound transformation of the day. Dusk settles not as an end, but as a gentle shifting of gears into a slower, more intimate rhythm. The world outside the gate recedes completely, and the Hanok prepares for its nightly ritual of rest. You are no longer a visitor observing a historical site. You have become a temporary resident, about to experience the unique sensory tapestry of a night spent within these ancient wooden walls. The process of closing up the house is a quiet ceremony. You slide the heavy wooden mun shut, its solid bar falling into place with a soft, definitive thud that seals you off from the outside world. Then, one by one, you glide the paper-paneled doors along their tracks, each soft click creating another layer of insulation, not just from the cool night air, but from the day itself. The house, which was so open and expansive just hours before, now turns inward, folding in on itself like a flower closing its petals. The only light comes from a single, flickering Kyeongsol lantern, its warm, orange glow casting long, dancing shadows that make the familiar contours of the room feel new and mysterious. With the artificial noise of the modern world absent, your hearing sharpens, tuning into the Hanok's nocturnal symphony. The soundscape is loud and rich. There is the constant, gentle creaking of the wooden structure itself as it cools and contracts, a series of pops and sighs that are the house's own language, telling you it is settling in for the night. Outside, the chorus of crickets is relentless, a rhythmic pulsing that seems to vibrate through the very floorboards. Occasionally, a rustle in the dry leaves of the courtyard signals the passage of a small animal, a hedgehog perhaps, or a weasel going about its business. These are not alarming sounds. They are comforting, a reminder that you are part of a larger, living world, not isolated from it in a soundproofed box. Now, you unroll your yo, the thin futon-like mattress, and your eyeball, the heavy, padded quilt, directly onto the warm ondol floor. This is the culmination of the day, the reason for the system. Lying down, you feel the deep, radiant heat from the stones below seep into your muscles, a primal comfort that is both physically soothing and psychologically grounding. There is no box spring, no elevated frame separating you from the heart of the home. You are sleeping on its warm, beating heart. The ceiling above you is dark, the massive, hand-hewn beams visible as deeper black lines in the darkness, giving you a sense of shelter and immense stability. You are lying in the palm of a giant, wooden hand. This experience of sleeping on the floor, in a room heated from below, is a mainstream historical fact that shaped Korean physiology and culture. Anthropologists note that generations of this practice influenced posture and even bone density. But beyond the physical, it fostered a unique sense of security and connection. The family slept close together in the warmed rooms, often parents and young children sharing a space, the darkness and the shared warmth creating a powerful, intimate bond. The night was not a time of isolation in separate bedrooms, but a continuation of the family's collective life, a quiet, shared vulnerability. If you needed to get up in the middle of the night, you entered a state of hyper-awareness. You learned to step precisely to avoid the floorboards that groaned the loudest, to slide doors with agonizing slowness to prevent their wooden tracks from screeching, and to navigate by memory and the slivers of moonlight filtering through the hanji paper. A single, clumsy step could echo through the entire house, waking everyone within. It was a nightly lesson in mindfulness and consideration, a physical practice of being aware of your impact on the shared environment, even in the deepest dark. Historians still argue whether the communal sleeping arrangements and the profound quiet of the pre-electric night fostered deeper familial bonds and a richer inner dream life, or if the lack of privacy and the constant, subtle noises led to fractured sleep and a baseline of low-grade exhaustion for many. Was it a recipe for intimacy or for irritation? As you lie in the warm darkness, listening to the house breathe around you, the question feels less important than the sensation. The night in a hanok is not an empty void to be endured. It is a presence to be experienced, a time when the boundary between yourself and the ancient, slumbering spirit of the house grows thin, and you finally, truly, understand what it means to come to rest. The first light of dawn filters through the hanji paper, not as an alarm, but as a gentle, gradual invitation to wake. The deep warmth of the ondol has softened to a residual glow, and the house is still, holding its breath. But this morning, a different thought begins to form, a quiet, sobering counterpoint to the idyllic peace. You think of the master thatcher, his hands a roadmap of his craft, and you wonder, who will learn his rhythms when he is gone? The morning sun illuminates not just the beauty of the village, but also the fine cracks in its preservation. The hanok, for all its timeless grace, exists in the modern world, and that world presents challenges its original builders could never have imagined. The primary antagonist is not a person or a policy, but a concept, convenience. The ondol system, for all its genius, requires constant, laborious tending. Chopping wood, managing the fire, and cleaning the flues is a far cry from the simple turn of a thermostat. The paper walls, while beautiful and breathable, are fragile. They tear, they soil, and they need to be replaced every few years, a skill that is becoming rarer than the houses themselves. The wooden structures, designed to breathe with the seasons, are vulnerable to the new, more extreme weather patterns of a changing climate. Torrential rains that can overwhelm the roof's drainage, and prolonged humidity that can accelerate rot in ways the original design never anticipated. To live authentically in a hanok today is to choose a life of mindful, constant maintenance over one of automated ease. Then there is the economic reality. These villages are not frozen in amber. They exist on land that is incredibly valuable. The pressure from developers who see not a cultural treasure but a prime location for high-rise apartments or commercial complexes is immense. For a young family, the choice is stark. Inherit a centuries-old wooden house that requires expensive, specialized upkeep and lacks modern amenities like multiple bathrooms or sound insulation, or sell the land for a life-changing sum of money and move into a standardized, low-maintenance apartment. It is a choice between preserving heritage and securing a future, and for many, the pull of the modern is irresistible. This is a mainstream historical fact of Korea's rapid 20th century development. Vast swathes of traditional hanok neighborhoods in cities like Seoul were bulldozed in the name of progress, their unique urban fabric lost forever, replaced by grids of concrete and glass. But within this struggle, a fascinating hybrid culture is emerging. You now find neo-Hanok designs that incorporate the aesthetic principles of the traditional house: the curved roof, the courtyard, the wooden joinery, but with hidden layers of modern technology. Double-paned glass slides behind paper-paneled doors. Radiant heating systems are embedded within the ondol flues, providing steady heat without the need for a wood fire. Bathrooms are updated, and kitchens are expanded. Purists may scoff, arguing that this dilutes the essence of the Hanok, that its soul is in its relationship with fire and handmade paper. But these adaptations may be the price of survival, a way to make the Hanok relevant and livable for new generations who want the connection without the constant, overwhelming burden. The power of the hashtag and the guest house. A significant force in saving these villages has been the rise of cultural tourism and social media. Young entrepreneurs, often not from artisan families, are buying up dilapidated hanoks and painstakingly restoring them to operate as guest houses, tea houses, and small museums. They use Instagram and YouTube not just for marketing, but for education, showcasing the beauty and the feeling of Hanok life to a global audience. The revenue from visitors who want to experience a night on an ondol floor provides the economic justification for the restoration work, creating a new, sustainable model for preservation that is driven by appreciation rather than mere obligation. Historians still argue whether the extensive modernization and adaptation of hanoks for contemporary life represents a vital evolution that ensures their survival or a slow, aesthetic death that strips them of their authentic cultural and historical meaning. Is a hanok with central air conditioning and fiber optic internet still a hanok? Or has it become a mere theme, a stylistic nod to a past it no longer truly embodies? As you watch the sun fully crest the mountain, illuminating the village in a clear, honest light, you see that the hanok is no longer just fighting the elements. It is fighting irrelevance, and its greatest battle is not against rain and rot, but against the seductive, relentless tide of a world that has forgotten how to slow down. You find yourself back in the courtyard, the madang, as the afternoon sun casts long, soft shadows from the eaves. The tour, in its detailed, step-by-step way, is over. You have felt the wood, traced the paper, and slept on the warm floor. You have understood the systems and the philosophies. But now, in the quiet, something else settles over you, a feeling that is more than the sum of these parts. It's a palpable sense of atmosphere, an indescribable essence that Koreans call Han. It's not a concept that translates easily. It is a quiet, resonant feeling of sorrow and beauty intertwined, a profound acceptance of what is, a melancholic grace that comes from enduring, from persisting. The hanok is the physical embodiment of this Han. Its weathered wood, its softly curving lines, its patient, seasonal adaptations, they all speak of a deep, collective experience, a history of weathering storms both meteorological and historical, and still standing with a quiet, unbroken dignity. This is the spirit of the place, the final, unspoken lesson. It's in the way the light, at this golden hour, seems to be absorbed by the hanji paper, making the entire house glow from within like a lantern. It's in the sound of the wind, not howling against a sealed window, but whispering as it passes through the latticework, a welcomed guest. It's in the sheer tactile pleasure of smooth wood under your bare feet and the solid, reassuring presence of a pillar that has held up this same corner of the sky for 200 years. The hanok doesn't shout its virtues. It whispers them in a language of texture, light, and shadow. It teaches you that harmony isn't about everything being perfect and new. It's about everything being in its right place, having earned its place through time and use, its scars and imperfections adding to, rather than detracting from, its beauty. You think of the generations who have lived here. The scholar who stared at this same persimmon tree, searching for a line of poetry. The child who scraped a knee on these very stones. The mother who paced this courtyard, singing a fretful baby to sleep. Their joys, their anxieties, their most mundane moments, all of them have been absorbed into the clay walls and the wooden beams. The house is a reservoir of these silent stories. You are not just looking at history, you are sitting inside its accumulated emotional residue. This connection to the past isn't academic here, it's sensory, emotional. It's a feeling of being a small, temporary link in a very long, resilient chain, a humbling and strangely comforting realization. This pursuit of a balanced and serene state of being, of which the Hanok is the ultimate architectural expression, is a mainstream historical fact of Korean aesthetics, a philosophy that valued yojong, a sense of subtle, lyrical emotion evoked by a landscape or a space. The Hanok was designed not just for physical comfort, but to cultivate this state of mind, to create an environment where the spirit could find rest and the mind could achieve clarity. It was a machine for living, yes, but even more so, a machine for feeling, for being. In the deepest winter, when the snow lay thick on the jiwa tiles and the world was silenced by the cold, families would often gather in the warmest room and play a game called yatnoi, a traditional board game played with sticks. The simple, rhythmic clatter of the yut sticks on the wooden floor, the bursts of laughter, the shared anticipation, these small, human moments of joy and connection, held within the protective, warm embrace of the house, are the true essence of the Hanok. It was never about the architecture alone. It was about the life that the architecture enabled, a life of quiet connection, to family, to nature, and to the slow, graceful passage of time itself. Historians still argue whether the concept of Han is a uniquely Korean cultural construct born from a specific history of hardship, or a universal human feeling that Korean artists and philosophers simply gave a name and a voice to, channeling it into their art and architecture with particular brilliance. But as you sit in the courtyard, feeling the last of the sun's warmth on your skin and the solid, patient presence of the house around you, the argument feels secondary. You are feeling it. It's in the air, in the wood, in the very stillness. The Hanok does not try to be happy or sad. It simply is. And in its profound, graceful acceptance of what is, it offers you the rarest of gifts in our frantic, modern world, a deep, resonating, and utterly perfect sense of peace. The journey through the Hanok village is complete. The final gate has been closed softly behind you, and the images of curved roofs against a twilight sky begin to gently recede from the forefront of your mind, settling into a quiet corner of memory where they will remain, a permanent reservoir of calm. The lessons of the wood and the paper, the fire and the wind, are not lessons that demand immediate action or frantic note-taking. They are seeds planted in the quiet soil of your subconscious, meant to germinate slowly, in their own time, reminding you in moments of haste that there is another, older rhythm available, a rhythm of patience and profound connection. The village does not ask for your constant remembrance, only that you carry its quiet pulse within you, a counterbeat to the frantic tempo of the everyday world. Let the feeling of the warm floor beneath you and the sound of the wind in the trees be the last conscious thoughts you hold onto tonight, a lullaby of harmony and resilience. Allow your breathing to slow, to match the slow, steady exhalation of the sleeping house, until the boundary between the memory of the place and the peace of your own rest becomes indistinguishable, and you drift into dreams under the same moon that shines down on its timeless, tiled roofs.